Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and it's been another roller coaster of a week for the Powell family. As you may or may not know, my wife Ange had radiation treatment for her stage 4 cancer. There's a really good success rate with this treatment, so we're super hopeful, but we won't know the results for 3 months. That's the good news. The bad news is that Ange now has some new pain in her body. Pain that was getting to a level where I was ready to go to the emergency room at a moment's notice. I'll say, the past 2 years have been miserable for the most part, and the worst thing about it all is seeing my wife in pain. And that's where we're at. We can't see a pain specialist for a week, but one of our doctors did write a script for some pain meds, and they have been helping. It's funny how it's so hard to get pain meds these days because so many people are abusing them, and when you really, really need them, unless you know the doctor, they're difficult to get. So I almost feel like we were lucky to get her that script. We've been trying to figure out what's going on, and I've been at the hospital every day this week for tests and treatments. I know I said I wasn't going to bring up cancer every week, and I'll try not to do that, but when there's news, I like to share it. Sharing here is easier than me talking to people about what's going on because I get really emotional sometimes discussing it. But I have no problem telling the world on this podcast. That's weird, but it is what it is. Anyways, enough bumming you out. Now it's time to tell you about my guest this week. He's an Olympic medalist who also has 3 Dew Tour medals and 4 X Games medals. And he's filmed with Grenade, Travis Rice, and more. And if that's not enough, he's also a professional hunter. I'm talking about Scotty Lago. I met Scotty when he was set up at the WSM trade show in Utah last February. He was a one-man band and brand selling his Lego snowboards to potential dealers. We chatted, I asked him to do a podcast, he said yes, it came out great, and here we are. Before we get into it, I want to ask you to share my social posts about this Scotty podcast because that really does get more earballs on the show, and it helps it grow. I also want to ask you to support the brands that make this podcast happen. I only work with the best, and they are Outdoor Research, Stanley, Elan Skis, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and Best Day Brewing. Now, let's talk with Scotty Lago. I will start this thing out with hunting, and I would call it a hobby, but I think you might get paid money to hunt. So for you, is hunting something like where you have sponsors and get paid like you did on the snowboard end?
It is, yeah. I'm kind of carving a living out of it right now. It's kind of funny because, yes, it is like a huge hobby, a passion of mine that I'm like, dude, I would love to somehow make a living in this field, because I just absolutely love it. So I've kind of just taken the same formula that I kind of did with snowboarding and applying it to hunting in a sense. So, got a handful of sponsors and just creating some content and helping out where I can.
And I would think that market, the hook and bullet market, I think they call it something like that, is probably way bigger than the ski and snowboard market in the grand scheme of things. So it could be more lucrative in the long run if you kind of hit the right track in it.
Yeah, I would suppose so. I mean, it's definitely a huge, huge market. I'm sponsored and associated with 6 Hour. They're actually out of New Hampshire, about 15 minutes north of me. And they've got one of the Army contracts for their new squad machine gun. And just that gun alone is a $4 billion deal that they signed with the U.S. Army. So I can't really even fathom that. But their hunting side is obviously a lot smaller, and I'm associated with their hunting side.
And when you get into hunting, it's obviously not about making money. I'm sure you're like a little kid, and do you start with like rabbits and birds and stuff, and then your dad kind of teaches you how to work your way around a gun, rubs some doe urine on you, and then takes you out to hunt deer and bigger game?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Let me clarify. Yeah, like hunting has nothing to do. I would be doing exactly what I would be doing regardless of if I'm getting paid or not.
Right.
So the basics of it, right, is going out and getting meat, going out and shooting a deer and processing that deer and putting it in your freezer. For the last 10 to 15 years or something like that, I haven't bought any meat. I just have 2 big freezers and I'll just eat all the wild game. That being said, I obviously will have a steak out at dinner or something,
Sure.
I'm a sucker for steak. So I just kind of want to clarify that for the people who at home who might not have a clue what I'm talking about. But yeah, so I started hunting when I was a young kid. my dad got me into it. He was a hunter, so I do primarily bow and arrow archery.
Oh, okay.
For majority of the season, I have a bow in my hand. That's very technical, requires a lot of practice and skills that I've kind of acquired over the years. But my dad kind of spurred the passion for me, and each year it's been getting progressively more fun. I've been getting more into it.
How about in the beginning, like your first kill, when you line one up and you're like a 10-year-old or 12-year-old and you look into that little deer's eyes, do you care at all or do you just shoot the shit out of that thing and you're like, yeah, I got my first deer?
That's a good point. No, I mean, most definitely I care, and I think that's the biggest thing. There is a lot of compassion for the animals. In fact, you get to know the animals and get to know them so well because you're hunting them that you gain this newfound respect and love for them, maybe that you never even had, right? So, like, honestly, it sounds weird, but like my love for animals and my knowledge of animals is huge. So, absolutely, yeah. So when you make the shot, there's a lot riding on it, especially with a bow, right? There's a lot of pressure. You're holding back the bow, and you know that you have this animal's life in your hands, and you want to make a clean and ethical shot. And if you make a clean and ethical shot, right, where you want to hit, as far as talking about a deer, the deer doesn't feel anything. It really doesn't. I mean, like, it'll run off, and like be like pumping with adrenaline, look around, be like, whoa, what was that? And then it'll literally just stumble and fall over, right? That's what you strive for. A good ethical kill where, the deer or the animal bears no pain. It's just a clean harvest.
And I would think for you, you're a professional snowboarder, and in the world of snowboarding, there's a lot of liberal people. And I'm sure you get people behind their keyboards giving you shit about killing animals. Do you hear shit like that? And do you engage with that? And what's the worst of it that you get?
Oh, yeah, that's definitely a real thing. I wouldn't necessarily say it's more liberal, but it's people who love animals, and I understand it, right? Like, I really do, because I love the animals. But there is a balance there, right? It's like, believe it or not, like, humans are actually part of the food chain, and we are kind of the top predators. We keep a healthy balance within the herd, right? So, like, do you need hunting? No. But without hunting, right? So, like, let me give you an example. Hunting is like one of the best population controls, right? So, like, the populations of white-tailed deer, for example, their numbers would go up and they would spike crazy, and then they would kind of reach their holding capacity, right? They would eat all the food. There'd be way too many deer, and then they would just dive bomb way down, and it just goes in waves like that, right? Like, boom, up super high and down super low, right? So hunting keeps it right at like a level playing field, right? Like, just kind of right in the middle, keeps everything in balance. And there's a lot of research that goes into the amount of animals you're allowed to harvest. And I don't really know where I was going with that. I forget your original question.
It's all good. That's enough about hunting, I guess. And, you're really passionate about it. You're really good at it. And it sounds like you're kind of carving a little path in the hunting world. But we're here to talk about your life and times, and it's more about snowboarding than hunting, at least in this podcast. And it's Seabrook, New Hampshire. I think it's 3 boys, mom and dad. Is it a nice beach community? And are your folks part of like the Lego ice cream empire? Or do they do something else?
Yeah. Born and raised in Seabrook, New Hampshire. We're a coastal town. New Hampshire has a sweet little 18 miles of coastline, so we're proud to be right there on the coast. And grew up on a hay farm. My grandfather originally had a couple of ice cream stands, one in Rochester and one in Rye. He gave one of them to my aunt, who runs it, and aunt and uncle in Rye, New Hampshire. Yeah, so, ice cream is a big part of my life, growing up, eating a lot of ice cream.
Did you have to work at the ice cream shop and stuff when you were growing up, or do you not have time for that?
Honestly, I never did. I would love to, though. It's like, I feel like I'm kind of missing out. I go in there, and it's such a great environment. People are all jolly and working super hard, and I was like, I kind of miss that, it'd be fun.
Yeah, and so you're the middle brother growing up. I think you all are like hyperactive kids. And were you guys tight? Were you guys always beating the shit out of each other? How did that go?
Yeah, we're definitely, beating the shit out of each other. But there's a decent age gap between me and my younger brother and my older brother. But we all got along, we all found different unique things that we're into. Yeah, my little brother got into snowboarding, was like on his board literally at like 3 years old. And was like ripping, but still snowboards a little bit here and there. I never pursued it as a profession or anything like that. And my older brother is a nurse down in Florida.
Okay, and it sounds like with snowboarding and you, You got on a snowboard, and the first time you got on one, you kind of figured out the edges, where a lot of people, it takes 3 days of pain. Everyone was looking at you like, look at this little kid, and how did he figure it out so fast? Do you remember it being that easy, or do you just hear stories about that?
Well, first of all, I started when I was 7, right? So, like, you start anything like that, you're not getting sore, you bounce right back. And, like, I don't even remember, honestly, learning. I remember some highlights, right? Like, when I first learned a 180, I'll never forget, like, my first backflip that I landed. There's all kinds of, like, little highlights that I'll remember. But, yeah, for the most part, it was somewhat painless, literally.
You start at 7. How old were you when you started competing in like the Green Mountain Series, which is like a legendary snowboard series with so many famous names associated with it?
I don't know, probably around 10. Yeah. So I'm 36 now, 99. I went to nationals, won nationals. I did a couple before that. Yeah, I don't know. I would say around 10.
And I think you're a year younger than Shaun White. Being that you're in the Green Mountain Series in the whole New England area, was he already killing it when you started? And were you at contests with him back then? Were you like the other little Grom that people were like, look at that dude?
Yeah, so I've been competing with Shaun. Exactly. Yeah, so we would like meet up at nationals. And no, definitely was not on his level. He was unbelievable. He was always amazing, essentially like a prodigy since he's been a kid. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put myself along the likes of him, especially when I was younger.
Okay, and when I say the people in the Green Mountain Series, there was like so many future legends. Who are the names that were competing with you guys that weren't household names at the time, but everybody knows today?
Oh, let's see. I mean, the biggest legend, Danny Cass.
Yep.
Couple-time Olympic medalist, founder of Grenade Gloves, which was like the biggest and coolest company back in the day. Ross Powers, Olympic gold medalist. Kelly Clark, Olympic gold medalist. We got some strong half-pipe routes. We got Pat Moore, Shane Pospisil, Alex Sorokin, Chris Hatt, Lane Knack. I know I'm missing so many.
And when you think about all those names and there's so many good people and you're always competing against Shaun, was it hard to get noticed and stuff like that early on? I mean, were you trying to make finals? Was that kind of the deal?
Yeah, I was in a different age category than Shaun, maybe. Because I didn't have a problem competing, like 99, I won 6 national titles.
Which is crazy, yeah.
In Telluride, Colorado. Yeah, it was like, I was doing everything, right? It's like border cross, slope style, giant slalom, half pipe. And like, dude, racing is so fun too. But it wasn't really necessarily hard, but like there would be standouts. I remember like first time seeing Zach Marvin from Minnesota, and I was just blown away. He was just doing 9s, and I just could not believe the level of riding. And yeah, it was always decently challenging, but it wasn't impossible.
You were doing every different discipline in snowboarding, but the one thing that you weren't doing was school, because by the time you get to high school, it was like, I don't know how you were able to make this happen, but how were you able to either trick your parents or trick the school or trick anybody to let you be homeschooled to pursue snowboarding? Because it sounds like you had a pretty loose homeschooling experience, and how were you able to make that happen?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit it on the head. Trick is more or less what I would say. I kind of tricked my parents. So I was like, Dad, Mom, I want to take like a month off to go on this snowboard trip. And they're like, oh, man. Like, I remember them looking at each other like, all right,
Yeah.
So at the time, I was getting homeschooled, right? So I just started getting homeschooled. But it was a program where like your parents had to be like the teacher, right? They had to like grade your work. They had to be there and teach you the lessons. But they had, full-time jobs. So I was essentially like grading my own work and trying to keep myself straight. And obviously, as you can imagine, it was a slippery slope.
Sure.
I've been grading my work. I'm like, all right, that was a trick question. I feel like I'm going to give myself that one. Yeah, so I just asked him to like take a month off. And then at the end of the month, I think another trip came up, another opportunity. And I'm like, oh, can we do another week? And then the week turns into another week. And then literally I just kind of never went back. But I had strong goals and a pretty strong vision, even at a young age. And I knew that I wanted to be pro. And a lot of things were kind of lining up for me at the time to make that a possibility. So I just went for it. My dad and my mom, believe it or not, just believed in me. And they just let me ride.
And you already had some things going on. Like, I think by the time you were 13 or 14, you started with the Budweiser Aerial Assault Tour. They were going around to New England resorts, and it was pretty much a circus sideshow of just jump after jump after jump. Were you like the youngest kid on that tour and you pretty much do like 15 different stops and get paid per stop as like a teenager?
Yeah, those shows were awesome. They were super fun. So put on by Budweiser, we would draw huge crowds. And of course, I don't even know how I was really jumping in the thing. Nowadays, probably couldn't pull that off, sponsored by Budweiser. I was like, Lord knows, 13, 14, whatever. I don't think I was getting paid. I was just doing it because it was awesome. It was fun. You get to show your skills in front of a crowd. Yeah, they were cool.
And I would think for air awareness on something like that, where you're getting like 50 jumps a night and you're being towed in and you have like a perfect jump, or at least as close to perfect as they're going to build for you guys, that little tour of maybe the 1,000 jumps that you get for Budweiser just helps you understand your body in the air a lot more than if you didn't do it that time.
Totally. It really was a great little setup there. The landing was super steep and we would chop it. So it would be essentially like a POW landing. So it was a single aerial jump, right? So like it was super steep. So that was pretty challenging, but you're like blasting off. There's skiers, aerialists launching like doubles and triples right next to you. So that was pretty cool to just be a part of it. And it was definitely, no doubt, a good little bump in practice, because you could just hot lap the thing. We would bring our own rope tow in and just like hot lap the jump. So it was definitely pretty beneficial.
Another thing that's weird about that time is that when you're 13 to maybe 16, 17 years old, you probably go from like 5'6" to like 6'1" or whatever you stand now. I'm sure you have a big growth spurt at one point. Did you have that super awkward phase, and did it ever impact your snowboarding?
I don't think I did, or nothing really stands out from that growth spurt.
Okay, so we had talked about you going and winning of like 6 different national titles at Telluride for the USASA Nationals. And is that what kind of propels you to get onto the Billabong team, or is Billabong like one of your first sponsors?
Yeah, it was actually Airwalk. Airwalk was my first sponsor. I got a pair of boots, and it was like the most unbelievable thing. Like I would equate it to like someone showing up at my house and dropping me off like a Range Rover or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it could have been like, here's some shoelaces, and I was just like, oh my God. That was pretty monumental.
Was that when Airwalk was important too?
Yeah. Airwalk was pretty big in the scene back in the day.
Yeah.
I think they're still alive, maybe in Europe or something like that. Maybe got bought out. Yeah, and then Billabong, I just kind of worked my way up, and met some awesome people over there at Billabong and spent a long time with that company.
And before I get into sponsors and money and stuff, I'll say that this has kind of been a lead up to your pro career. And with most successful pro careers, whether it's ski or snowboard, it's usually 2 parts, especially for the OGs like yourself. And the first part is like where you do well in contests and you compete until you get sick of competing. And then the second part is like where you graduate to a point where you can just film per se, and that's all you need to do. We're going to start with the comp side. You're doing great on the USASA circuit. Do you graduate to the FIS level? Do they bump you up? How does it work? How do you move up?
I think you just kind of take your chance, right? You're like, all right, well, I'm kind of maxed out here at USASA or USSA or whatever, and I'm going to go take a stab at a Grand Prix or a Dew Tour or, see how I do at the US Open. So that's kind of how it played out. And I definitely had an early start. I mean, I've never been amazing at competing, right? It's always been pretty damn challenging for me. So definitely some big ups and downs over the years.
Well, you figure those first 4 years from like 2001 to 2005-ish, I mean, you're doing some FIS stuff, some World Cup stuff, some NORAMs, and you're barely a top 20 guy. And while you had done well in like the Green Mountain Series, does it get totally frustrating where you're putting everything you have into snowboarding and you're traveling to all these contests and you're just not doing well?
No, I mean, I had pretty good perspective back then. At the time I was competing against people who were, my idol,
Yeah.
I was just stoked to see them rise. In no way did I think I was on their level or really trying to compete. I was just trying to put on a good show, right? A good showing, trying to stoke the crowd out, just trying to put down a run and do something that was good for me. And it was just a long process of kind of just doing that.
It's time for my first sponsor break, and I'm going to start things out with Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. Summer is right around the corner, and based on the past couple of years, it's going to get really, really hot. And getting in the water is the perfect way to enjoy the heat. But you need to do it right, and Peter Glenn is your one-stop shop for all of your needs this summer. Think wakeboard, water ski, kneeboard, tubes, swimwear. They have everything to make your summer more fun and functional. Peter Glenn has all the brands, all the products, a knowledgeable staff, a best-in-class website if you can't make it into their stores, and a low price guarantee. That's right. If you find a lower price on a product that Peter Glenn is selling at a reputable dealer, call up Peter Glenn, let them know that price. They will match that for you. That really does help support the show by buying from Peter Glenn, and they're going to give you free shipping on orders of $50 or more. Peter Glenn isn't one of those big guys trying to take over the industry. They're the mom and pop shop that you've trusted to get your gear you need at the best prices for over 70 years. To find out more, head on over to peterglenn.com. Next up, it's Outdoor Research, and I've been using OR products since I moved to Seattle almost 25 years ago because they outperform everything on the market. I mean, Outdoor Research builds products to perform in the wet, soggy, cold weather of the Pacific Northwest. And when you live where we do, you need to have the best in class, and that's what OR's always been. While OR's always been known for building the industry-leading gear for mountaineers, and they still do that, over the past few years, they've been focusing on working with their A-list athletes in the ski and snowboard world to create new fits and kits for the snow scene, which everyone has seen on X Games podiums and on legends like Mark Abma. And now, OR is launching its freewheel mountain bike collection, and there's no cutting corners here either. Well, I could tell you about it. Here's what the folks at Free Hub Magazine had to say about what OR is doing in bike. Outdoor Research, with its legacy rooted in scientific inquiry and a passion for the outdoors, has once again raised the bar, offering riding gear that's not just functional, but also stylish and durable. The meticulous designs and thoughtful engineering of the Freewheel collection have the power to transform the mountain biking experience. Reviews don't get much better than that, and to see all the new products that OR has, head on over to outdoorresearch.com. My final sponsor this round is Best Day Brewing, and while I love the taste of a good beer, I don't always need the alcohol. I mean, my life revolves around driving my kid places, running errands, interviewing people, and all of these things I do better when I don't have a head full of alcohol. These days, when I'm not partying, I still like to enjoy an ice-cold beer, and that's where Best Day Brewing comes into play. I love their hazy IPA, the Kolsch that you can get on all Alaska airline flights, their Electro Lime Cerveza, which is the first Mexican-style NA beer that I've loved, and their new White Belgian style. They're all just so amazing and have just as much flavor as any alcoholic beer you're going to find. And they average about 60 calories a beer, and they won't get you in trouble. That's when I'm not partying. And when I am partying, I mix in a few Best Days throughout the night, and I found that by doing that, I can stay out until last call. You should try it. To have the best day or night ever, head on over to bestdaybrewing.com and get 15% off your first order. And if you make that order over $50, we'll throw in free shipping. You can thank me later. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. You're traveling all around the country, and it didn't sound like your dad was in the ice cream business. It sounded like your uncle was. So I don't know what the family business is, but I'm guessing that you guys have to make some sacrifices for your snowboard career. And do you guys get used to just like sleeping in cars, living on couches, and doing whatever you can to like not have to spend a shit ton of money to get to the next stop?
Yeah, no doubt about it. I couldn't have done it without my parents. I mean, there was a huge sacrifice that they've made. Time, money, and we were staying in some of the most ghetto motels that you could find, or sleeping in the car sometimes. I remember a trip that me and my dad did out to North Star, right? It's like beautiful in the spring, like gorgeous weather. We're like, all right, well, we're going to crash in the car, like save money in a hotel. And then we stayed up at the parking lot in the mountain. It was the coldest night I've ever experienced. We just had to turn the car on like every 10 minutes. So yeah, definitely some grinders. And then, I did a lot of couch surfing with friends that I met through snowboarding. And, if I had any opportunities to stay with sponsors, if they had a team house or something like that, I would jump on it.
You'd crash with friends, but then you'd also be traveling with people that were known as the Frends Crew. And that might not start until a little bit later, but who was considered a friend in that Frends Crew? Who was your, like, the 8 dudes or whatever that made that up?
That was Danny Davis, Jack Matrani, Luke Matrani, Mason Aguirre, Kevin Pierce, Keir Dillon, and I believe that's it.
You guys were super tight, and that whole crew, I don't know if everyone on that crew is Burton, but it seems like most of them were Burton, and you're from New England, and everybody knew about you, I would think, from a young age in New England, at least had heard about your riding. How did you not end up on a Burton program?
I don't know, man. I just kind of wanted to be like, I got a lot of respect for Burton. Obviously, they're an unbelievable company, but I was just kind of a little bit anti-Burton, like my whole life. I don't know. There was such a big company, and I don't know. I just kind of wanted to find my own way, I guess.
So they'd never talked to you or anything, and you never really wanted to pursue them?
No, actually, no. I had some talks for sure. They just didn't really work out. Yeah, it just didn't work out.
Okay, and I'd say the cool thing about being in Burton country was the U.S. Open, especially the U.S. Open that was at Stratton. I think it was there for like 25, 27 years, and it was like no other experience in snowboarding. Can you kind of describe what those events were like and how it was different? And is there anything today that's like that?
It was chaotic, right? I mean, like people would come out of the woodworks for this event. Like some, the best snowboarders in the world would be at Stratton, Vermont, and people would show up, and people would get loose. People would get drunk and throw snowballs, and there would just be thousands and thousands of people. I mean, I was a fan. I was watching, and I would get to forerun or do the junior jam or anything like that. But yeah, it used to be pretty mental back in the day.
And I heard about you forerunning. It didn't go as planned, I don't think. What happened with your forerunning experience?
I have nightmares of this. It was a huge finals, tons of people there. I don't know, maybe like a couple thousand people. And I was the first person to drop, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to go do a crippler first hit. Totally fucked up somehow. Ended up like literally like landing on my head. It was the most embarrassing thing ever, first hit. And then just rode down through the middle of the half pipe, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go home now.
Is that the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to you while snowboarding?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I guess. I'm sure there's been something more embarrassing than that, but it's definitely a memory, that I didn't forget.
And then when I think about your life and times without having high school, because I always ask people, like, what kind of person were you in high school? What music did you listen to? Did you do this? Did you do that? When you think about you, like, were you into, like, punk rock music? Or were you into, like, classic? Like, what kind of person were you, even though you weren't in high school?
Yeah, I was into hip-hop. I, like, specifically remember, like, when I was in grade school, like, raging Limp Bizkit, which is awesome.
Yeah, they're coming back.
But yeah, I mean, like, I would listen to Green Day. Like, Green Day was like one of the first bands that I like kind of fell in love with. And something about Green Day really, like, I guess resonates with snowboarding for me. I think maybe I used to listen to Green Day a bunch going to the mountains, but I don't know, a little bit of this. I'm into some country nowadays, but I wasn't into country until later on. I don't know, maybe in my 20s or something like that.
So were you like part snowboarder, part hunter kid? Like maybe wearing a camo shirt and like six pants or something like that? Maybe not those brands, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, like, I would run some camo here and there, but that wasn't like a huge part of my life at the time. That was like something that I did in September and October, and I was in the mountains in November. So yeah, dude, I don't even know, dude. I was just running baggy jeans, dude. Not quite as baggy as like Jenko's, you know what I mean? But I would run some baggy jeans, and yeah.
And then when I think of life without high school's where a lot of people learn how to party. But for you, I would think that learning how to party happened through snowboarding. I mean, when you're at the U.S. Open, did you go to those legendary house parties?
No, I mean, when I was at the U.S. Open, especially younger, I was chilling. I was up there with my parents. In contests in general, I wouldn't party and go compete the next day. I would be a good boy for sure. But, obviously didn't get to party in high school, but I was on the road, right? I was traveling. We were bouncing around. And I was kind of hanging out with an older crew. So, yeah, I got my fair share.
So the Frends Crew, it seemed like a lot of those dudes rode for Burton, which I said. But I feel like, were you on part of that legendary Rossi team of the early 2000s, like late 90s, early 2000s?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I was on Rossi for a while, and they had an unbelievable team.
Could you name off some of those people? Because when you think about their team, it was like Rossi never really resonated in snowboarding in the States in terms of sales. Like, they were always the fifth choice on the wall, but the team and the money they put into it was so good. It's like, why couldn't they build the snowboard brand here?
Right. I don't know. I mean, Lord knows that might just come down to like to marketing or business sided decisions on their end. But I mean, they had a stacked team, right? So, I mean, I was really young when I was a part of the Rossi team when they were huge. But I mean, it was Andrew Crawford, it was Todd Richards. It was Hannah Beeman. It was Travis Rice, Jonas Emery. Who else was on there? You know any dudes?
They had like JF, didn't they have?
Oh, JF. That's right. Yeah, JF.
It was just stacked. Yeah. I mean, it was like one of those things where you say those names now and they're all like household names except for one or two that might not be American. And it's so crazy that they could never sell snowboards in the States. But what was almost crazier to me is that you do that for a while, and then your next brand that you go to, and I'll say that in the late 90s and early 2000s, there was a big push for the step-in binding. Flow starts in like 96, and they are competing against the Switches and the DNRs and all the different brands that were out there. They're the only ones that make it through the millennium, I feel like, because everybody realized that the step-ins didn't perform as well. But Flow was kind of like a hybrid. And when the 2000s hit, Flow was still around. They were the only brand really left that I feel like was making a product that was even similar to that, a convenience-based product. And what made you first put your foot in a Flow binding?
I was out at Mount Hood, and I met up with the team manager, and we were just talking, and I think it just kind of naturally came about that way. Yeah, I gave him a shot, and there was definitely like a little bit of learning curve when I first started riding Flows. And when I first started riding them, the binding, it was good. It's been around for a while, but essentially it was kind of in its infancy, compared to what it was years later. It's just way better binding years later.
So when you get on it early on, I mean, you're at a point in your career where you're wanting to take things to the next level. I mean, you're always wanting to get better, and you sign on to Flow. Is there a performance advantage there, or is it just about money? Because that money is going to make your career happen too. I mean, they're both important things.
Yeah, like it really came down to like performance for sure, right? Like I had to make sure that the bindings, the boards were awesome, right? And they were right there with the best of them. So I had no problem performance-wise. Definitely money was a big factor, no doubt about it. Trying to do it professionally, that comes with it. And it was also like I saw my future there at Flow, right? And they wanted to put some effort and some oomph behind me. And I wanted to be a part of that, right? Like I wanted to go do some photo shoots. I wanted to go film. I wanted to, kind of do the whole gig, and they were all about it. So we kind of just started off that way.
So your boards, boots, and bindings with Flow. And for a professional rider, I would think image is everything, but that's not to every professional rider. It is to a lot of professional riders. And sometimes the stickers on your board can kind of tell a story. And at that point when you got on Flow, I don't want to say they were more of a recreational binding, but they did get constantly better, and they were a much better binding when you got off them than when you got on them. And does your image take a hit at all, or do you get clowned on by your friends for being in what is looked at as a quasi-step-in binding?
Yeah, no doubt about it. I'm not going to deny that, and like at the time, it wasn't considered the coolest company by any means. So that was kind of a factor too.
In your biggest years of snowboarding, who were the big brands that you were on? Because you've had so many great sponsors, but when you think of the best years, who was paying you?
Billabong, Flow, Rockstar, Nike. Yeah, those are some heavy hitters.
So when you have, I guess, stickers on a board like that, the Flow sticker doesn't even matter because you've got so many great brands behind you. And I'm sure you probably wore the shit out of Nike shoes and had a nice little wardrobe of Nike stuff. And when you think about the products that you're using that your sponsors make, like a product like Rockstar, I'm sure it's a big contract, but are you a big fan of their products? Like, do you drink energy drinks? And when your kid turns 13, we'd be like, hey, let's try a Rockstar.
Honestly, yeah, I would drink them when I was younger, but I drink them now more days than I ever do. Whatever, it's a drink, right? It's a good drink. It definitely gets you like amped up and crazy, and yeah, it's good energy boost, and that's kind of why I'll drink it nowadays.
Nice. And so while you're at the peak of your career, we talked about all those brands. You're an Olympic bronze medalist, which means you're third best in the world, period, at what you do over the past 4 years, or at least I think that's what an Olympic medal is supposed to signify. And are you able to make $500,000 or more being a snowboarder? Or is that just me like praying that you make a shit ton of money?
Yeah, I was making right around there.
That's amazing. So You were smart. You had an agent. And while agents aren't for everyone, I don't think, I mean, for a dude like yourself who has contests, who's filming, who has so many different things going on, it totally makes sense. How did having an agent make life easier and more lucrative for you?
Well, I mean, they just did the hard part for you. You know what I mean? It's like you want to have good relationships with the companies, right? So like battling it out on the negotiations can get a little slippery, right? And being at an agency, it's just one less thing to worry about, right? You can focus on your snowboarding, agency's going out and has your best interest in mind. Yeah, it was great.
Are you constantly being like pitched deals? And have you ever had to pass anything up, even though it was really good money, but it just didn't line up with who you are?
Yeah, I definitely pass a lot of stuff up. That's just what you have to do, when you're riding professionally, you definitely not want to be a sellout, you don't want to be doing some kooky ass shit.
No, but your window is definitely small, so you have to kind of, I guess, look at everything and then make the smart decision. And I would think time is a problem too, because from the time you're probably 17, 18 on, are you pretty much on the road from like October to March?
Yeah, the seasons are long. And not only that, like you're riding in the summer too, right? So you're going out to Mount Hood, you're spending a couple weeks at Mount Hood. And there was a stint that I would, be going to New Zealand every year for, close to a month. And then we would also bounce down to Argentina, Chile, either film or do some catalog shoots down there. So we were just constantly on snow, constantly snowboarding.
Did it ever get old? Did you ever get to the point where you're like, Jesus, I just need a break and I can't do this? Or did you always have the love of snowboarding and that never happened?
I always loved snowboarding and I loved what I did even more. Like I loved being a professional snowboarder. Like it was really fun to go out and try to learn new tricks and get shots and film, and the whole act of it was really fun for me. But I'm a homebody. Like I love being home, I was always excited to kind of get back home. But when I'm back home, I'm not riding for the most part because I'm 2 hours away from the mountains on the seacoast. So yeah, I'm chilling.
I'm going to jump back into riding, and leading up into the 2006 Olympics, you won your first huge event. It was a World Cup halfpipe. And can you describe the feeling of competing on all these different levels, but finally getting to the top? Because I don't think there's anything higher than the World Cup at that point, and you winning a halfpipe event there. I mean, who's the rest of that podium?
To be honest, I'm not really sure who I shared the podium with, but I definitely do remember that. That was in Saas-Fee in Switzerland. I had done my qualifiers run, and I kind of got docked a little bit for grabbing twice on the same hit. I think I grabbed melon. And I'm docked kind of hard. So at the time, the U.S. team and then one of the coaches picked one of the judges' brain about it, going into finals, right? And he's you need to mix up the grab, right? So I was just thinking, I was all right, well, let me try frontside 9 nose. And just learned it right away. And that was kind of a staple. I was doing frontside 9 nose and rocket airs for a while after, but did that for the first time in the contest and ended up taking my first World Cup win. That was cool.
Did you almost unlock a cheat code for more confidence and kind of believe that you belong at the top at that point when you win one?
I mean, honestly, at that point, I knew I was right there, right? And it was almost finally, I had a lot of confidence and believed that I should have been there for a while. I felt like it almost just kind of took a little bit longer than I would have liked.
With that win, you had a real shot to make the Olympic team, and you're at the final qualifying event. I feel like weather moves in, they postpone the contest. When that kind of thing happens, does that mess with your head at all? Or does it get into your head that hey, I've got 1 or 2 runs to make the Olympic team? And how do you handle the pressure like that?
Not good. If I did, I'd be a better competitor. I'd kind of figure that out, later on in my career. Not even necessarily figured it out. I got better at it. But weather was always really never a factor. I never let that kind of run an excuse train, but competing was just nerve-wracking for me. It really was. It didn't matter what contest I was in. I was just gutted, and I really didn't really enjoy it. That being said, there's no better feeling ever than landing the run that you wanted to land and being on the podium. But it was exactly the same. Same can be said for falling. It's devastating for me. And I remember at least 10 times, after the contest when I fall, I'll be that's it. I'm done competing, never competing again. But I'm not poor sports style. I'm just thinking that in my head, more or less because I wanted to go out and film. So that was a big factor too.
I mean, it seems like there's only 2 dudes that I've really noticed this with. Shaun White over the past 15 years and Travis Rice in natural selection events when his back's against the wall. It seems like those dudes have some extra switch where they don't feel the pressure and they just always stomp when they need to. Is there anybody else that you can think of that's like that, or is it just those 2?
No, those are 2 great examples. There's definitely, Mark McMorris.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
So, I think Shaun is the best example. Travis Rice, Mark McMorris. Who else is clutch? There's a lot of great snowboarders who are clutch. When the pressure's on, they ride at their best, better than they've ever ridden, right? And that's what really separates the good from the best, is when you can capitalize on that pressure, on those high intense moments, and ride the best you can.
Yeah, when anybody's watching that moment, you just know it's going to happen. With some of the other riders, you don't know. It could happen, but most likely it's not going to happen like it does for those guys. But with Shaun, it seems like he wasn't really part of any crew in snowboarding. I don't know him. I could care less if he hangs out with other snowboarders personally. He single-handedly Tony Hawked the sport of snowboarding, I feel like, and took it to another stratosphere. Why doesn't he get the credit that he's earned from the core of the sport? Like, why do people feel like, as well as this guy snowboards, that just because they don't like his personality as much, they can talk a bunch of shit on him, even though he's better than, I mean, I don't know if anybody's ever ridden a half-pipe like he has. I mean, I guess there's people that are arguably as good, but I don't think there is.
No doubt about it. Shaun's like the best of the best. He was just a loner. He didn't really roll too heavy with the people he competed with, or at all, really. I feel like he had a hard time becoming friends with people who he thought were threats. Honestly, that mentality, I just couldn't even fathom, right? Like, I'm like, dude, you're not competing against me. We're not in a fight, right? You want to just go ride the best you can ride. And I was just never really into that aggressive mentality against other competitors. It was, I don't know. Yeah. Shaun was just, he was different. He would do some kooky stuff sometimes.
It's time for my second round of sponsors, and Elan Skis doesn't need to sponsor this podcast in the summertime, but they do it because they understand the importance of cultivating the stories that make the snow industry what it is. So while they're cultivating stories off snow, on snow, Elan is building a cult following here in the US, and there are a few reasons for that. First is that the award-winning Ripstick line has proven time and again to make you a better skier. The reason why? Elan uses the best materials known to man, and that's no joke. This is the same Elan known for building award-winning luxury yachts, so there's never any cutting corners, and the fit and finish is better than anything else on the ski wall. Just look up and down and compare your Elans to anything else, and you'll see the difference. The second reason why Elan's selling more skis in the US is their Playmaker line. Yep, Elan has a line of twin tips that will go head-to-head with anything on the mountain. They're light, they're lively, and they're built better than any other twin tips on the wall. I'm skiing the 101, and it's been my daily driver for 2 years, and they're so much fun. Before you buy your next pair of skis, please demo a pair of Elans, or just head on over to elanskis.com, pick up a pair, and trust me, you're going to elevate your skiing experience. My final sponsor this round is Stanley, the iconic Northwest brand that invented the category of keeping things hot and cold over 100 years ago. You remember Stanley from your grandfather's green thermos that kept his coffee hot and cold forever when he took you out on adventures. Well, Stanley still makes that bottle, and so much more. I know you know this because they are absolutely blowing up all over the world. With Stanley, you can think tumblers, water bottles, barware, camping utensils, coolers, vacuum bottles. There really is something for everyone, and you aren't going to find them overpriced like a lot of copycat designer brands that have popped up recently. Stanley is the originator, and they pride themselves on providing you with the best products at the best value. And that value gets even better when you shop with my code. That's right, when you head on over to stanley1913.com and go shopping, when you check out, enter the code SNOW30, that's all one word, the number 30 and no spaces, and you'll get 30% off your entire order. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. You know what sucks for your career was Shaun White, because if he just skateboarded, you'd probably have 5 or 6 more wins in your career. But did it always feel like between the Frends Crew and Shaun that you always were fighting to try to even make finals almost or get on the podium?
Yeah, maybe in the podium and anything like the Shaun's competing, it's obviously very challenging to win. But I really didn't even care, man. I honestly really did not. I was never oh, Shaun, gotta beat him, right? That was never even a factor, right? Maybe that was a factor. Maybe I just mentally kind of knew that he was on a whole different level, right? And he was. So I wasn't even necessarily even competing with him, right? I just wanted to go out and just put on a good show and put the run that I knew that I could land down.
Well, you did win some events. I think the highlight would probably be the X Games Gold for best method because you've got an X Games Gold. But that was a strange year because of your broken jaw. Are you surprised they even let you ride when you were eating through a straw?
Yeah, they were definitely on the verge of not letting me ride too, right? Because if you were ever to hit your head or whatever, get nauseous and you had to throw up, then it could be in a pretty dangerous situation.
Oh, the chunks wouldn't make it out, huh?
Yeah. So there was someone there at the bottom and the top of the half pipe with wire snips, in case I had to throw up or whatever. I mean, other than that, and I lost a bunch of weight because I could not physically eat anything, whatever I could get through the cracks in my teeth. So I lost so much weight. But I kind of rode good, right? I ride the best usually at my lightest weight. I ended up getting third in pipe and won gold and best method.
Yeah, which is pretty awesome. When you win a gold medal at the X Games and you do it really risking a lot because you've got your jaw wired shut, that just shows how much you're going to put on the line for the X Games. How much do they give you? How much do you win?
I don't know. Maybe it's like around 10 grand or something. It was obviously not the main event, right? Not that X Games really pays that great anyways. I think like, it's anywhere like 30,000 for first, which is kind of crazy, right? Like you're literally the best and biggest contest out there. And, it's really just not that much.
No, I mean, not when you're putting your life on the line, because I've done a lot of comparisons where I can see like cornholers at their biggest event. They make like 25 grand. And I know that they're not
Right.
risking as much as you guys. So that is pretty crazy. But in terms of winnings in general, how much is the most you've ever walked away from a contest?
That would be the Aaron style. I won 50,000, and that was by far the biggest that I've ever won. And it'd be like 10,000 here or whatever, maybe 15,000, but it was 50 and large sum.
When you get that kind of money, do they tax you on it? Do they take like half?
So I was in Japan, and they tax it, right? But then you can get it back. You just like file some paperwork or whatever, because you're not a citizen there of the country. But I don't think I paid bringing the money back in to the States. I think I like smuggled that stuff back in and paid, just whatever.
What do you mean? You smuggled a check?
No, cash.
That is pretty crazy that you brought $50,000 here.
Yeah.
But you lived to tell the tale, and I would say your biggest event in life is the Vancouver Olympics. But I'll also say that there's a chance that you don't make the team. And I'll preface this with life is not fair and bad things happen to good people. And the first bad thing happens to Kevin Pierce. I remember him being the one dude that people were talking about that could beat Shaun White. But then he suffers a traumatic brain injury in Utah on New Year's Eve, leading right up to the Olympics. You're there. Half-pipe snowboarding has some violent crashes. Was that like the worst you've ever seen?
That was, yeah. His crash was definitely the worst I've ever seen.
Is it one of those things where you're right there and you're watching your friend and you're like, he might not make it?
Yeah, it really was. I mean, like, I didn't know it was Kevin, but I saw the crash and instantly I knew that it was a life-threatening crash, right? I knew like it was just the perfect storm of crashes. And I found a ski patrol and I was like, you guys literally need to get a helicopter here. Like I like called it and I'm like, bring a helicopter here. Like you're going to need an airlift out. And we ran up to the pipe and found out it was Kevin, and he was in such bad shape. It was really horrible. And you're right. I mean, he was a shoo-in for the Olympics, right? He was like one of the top guys, and it's just super unfortunate, crazy, life-changing moment. But he's doing great right now. He's crushing it. He actually moved to Florida. We hang, we talk all the time. He rips surfing and can rip snowboarding. He's not like jumping, or like spinning or flipping or anything like that. But yeah, he's doing good. He's got 2 daughters as well.
Awesome. So it's great to hear that he's doing so well because that was so horrible. And he was one of those dudes that could have been on the team. And then another part of that Frends crew, Danny Davis, he was pretty much on the team as well. And then there was like a party situation where he's on an ATV. And unfortunately, it's like a lesson learned situation where he hurts himself and he's not able to go to the Olympics. And he was pretty much on the team, I feel like. If those two things don't happen, do you not make the Olympic team?
Yeah, I think so, right? So it would have been a lot more fierce competition, right? So I qualified second behind Shaun, and they take 4. So who knows how it would have shook out, but I think I still would have made it. I think we just would have had like the dream team rolling in.
Yep. With Kevin, it's one of those things where he's doing what you guys love and he's trying to progress, and he has a crash that could happen to any of you guys. But leading right up to the Olympics, how do you get that out of your head, what you saw? I mean, is that a hard thing to do?
It is. I mean, it definitely had an effect on me and my snowboarding. I was at the top of my game kind of at the time, right? So I had a lot of confidence in my snowboarding, and I knew that it was like super, super rare, but I think I actually kind of played maybe in my head, maybe years later down the road. But yeah, man, it was what it was, right? You knew you had to go out and throw down, and, that's what we did.
And you say played out years later in your head, and I'm just going to guess that, like, regardless of the injury that you watched happen, just being a snowboarder who goes from, like, a 15-year-old rubber kid to, like, a 21-year-old who's figuring out all the flips and spins and the progression of how to do them, to then, once you get into your 30s a little bit, I would think it goes from being fun to getting scary, like almost, I don't want to get hurt anymore. Does that ever hit your head? Or, like, not hit your head, I'm sure that happens as well, but does that ever enter your mind of, like, as you get older, there's like a shift in how rad you want to get?
Yeah. Oh, no doubt about it. I mean, you have to have that fear I mean, like, that's going to keep you grounded and safe and alive. And I think you got to flirt with that balance of being scared, right? And because if you're scared, you kind of know that you're pushing yourself, right? You're out of your comfort level. So, I mean, I would like to literally say that I was scared every single time I would go boarding, or competing or filming or anything, like you kind of want to, like, you want to scare yourself, the risk and what could happen, but also like you're ultimately confident in your snowboarding.
And while I'm at it and I'm talking about the Frends Crew and injuries, I guess I should bring up Luke Matrani, as he had a huge injury and he was forced to retire. But is it true that he could have been like the best of all the Frends Crew and then that injury happened and no more Luke?
I mean, Luke is essentially kind of a prodigy child like Shaun was, His whole career, he was unbelievable. He kind of similar to me. He didn't really love competing. But yeah, I mean, like he had multiple podiums and he could kind of do whatever he wants. He's like one of the more talented kids that I've ever met. Can skateboard super good, can play music, can snowboard. And yeah, no doubt about it. We're out in New Zealand. We're practicing half pipe and he ended up having a pretty gnarly crash and broke his neck. And obviously that was a pretty big scare and a shock for him, especially because, he had no feeling for a while. I mean, it was pretty serious surgery. And, he just kind of took a good hard look and he's like, it's not worth it for me. So just kind of opted out.
So you were there for that one as well?
Yeah.
Okay, so you've been on like some pretty heavy moments, but that's just part of snowboarding in life, I feel like. Let's see, so you're the Frends Crew representative in the Olympics, and while you're a cool snowboarder in a sea of Olympians, do you totally nerd out over opening ceremonies in Vancouver?
It was really cool, man. It was super cool to be a part of it and a lot bigger of a deal than I ever thought it would be. We're so proud. Like, I consider myself a patriot, right? So proud to go represent the United States. You get all this swag, you get all this Polo and Ralph Lauren swag, like more gear than you would ever need for like years.
Right.
They all just have big USA embroidered on them, So it was really cool to just run that around the Olympic Village and know that you're representing, US, and it was cool.
In the contest, you land one of the best runs of your life, and when you finish, you just hear yourself screaming and yelling. Have you ever been that fired up after a run, and do you know that's going to land you on the podium?
I was pretty amped. I was definitely pretty amped up, given because I think at that time it was probably the best run that I've ever landed.
Yeah, totally.
So doing it, the best run I've ever landed at the Olympics during finals, it was pretty crazy. It was pretty surreal, right? And I knew right when I landed, I knew that I would most likely be on the podium, right? Or at least I did the run that I wanted to do. So it was pretty cool. I was so fired up. My dad, my aunt, my brother, grandfather was in the crowd and went down, and it was a really cool moment.
I can't even imagine how proud they must have been of you and how probably there's some emotions and everything going on. That's so cool. And then while you didn't get the gold, Shaun White gets the gold. So at the medal ceremony, you get to hear the Star-Spangled Banner. Does that help bring out even more emotions?
Yeah, man, it was really cool to hear the national anthem. Yeah, it was awesome. So thanks, Shaun.
Do you guys do a lot of Olympic press together just because you guys are medalists, or do they just separate you and you guys go your own ways?
We did some press together, but for the most part, he was kind of on his own schedule and program.
Well, without a PR agent, you happen to get more press than almost anybody at the Olympics, unfortunately. A girl takes a photo with you. It's kind of stupid. She looks like she's giving you a blowjob, but it's really just playing with the medal. And the U.S. Olympic Committee wants you to leave Vancouver immediately. What sucks is I don't even think you hook up with that girl, and she ruins your Olympics, or not ruins it, but definitely puts a dent in it, and maybe even costs you some money in the future. Have you ever talked to that woman again?
No, I've never spoken to her. Why, you got her on the line?
No. I should have hunted her down. That would have been amazing.
That would have been such a great surprise. No, I never talked with her. I don't have anything against her, obviously.
So that took away you being able to enjoy all the Olympic events and everything after you got a medal, which kind of sucks, but you end up doing Jimmy Kimmel. He throws you a little party. And I would think that when you're an Olympic medalist, or when you're a snowboarder at your level and you have won big contests, that there are some opportunities that you get that nobody else will have. Like maybe you can watch Rage Against the Machine from the wings of the stage or something crazy like that. What's the coolest shit that you've been able to experience because of your fame?
I don't know, man. I mean, like being on Jimmy Kimmel was pretty cool, and him throwing me a closing ceremony was definitely a highlight. But yeah, I don't know.
You get the keys to your city? That happened?
I do. I have the keys to the city, but I've never had to use them. I don't know how I use them either. You know what I mean? Like, do I need to like speed through town, get pulled over, and then just like bust out the keys, be like, "Yo, I have the keys to the city." Actually, it's like one or one good free pass. I don't know, but yeah, the hometown support, especially after the Olympics, was unreal. I mean, just it was kind of one of the coolest parts of it was coming back home and seeing how proud that everyone was that I represented, the area. Good.
How about the world of snowboarding? Do they embrace it and want to give you more press and talk about the Olympics? Or is it something that just comes and goes in that world?
I mean, like, it's definitely a huge thing in snowboarding, right? And no one in the snowboard world gave a shit that I got kicked out. If anything, they were more stoked on it.
Street cred.
Yeah, it's just, we're snowboarders.
Yeah, I mean, and speaking of street cred, we're not going to get too into it, but there's two parts of snowboarding, and like I said earlier, part of it is the contest world. You're a part of that. Eventually, people graduate into filming, and that's exactly what you wanted to do. But in terms of street cred, having an ender part in a grenade movie is probably what every single kid in the world at that point would want to have. This is pre-Olympics for you. It's like 2008 you're filming for it. I think it comes out in 2009. When that part comes out, do people look at you as a snowboarder a little bit differently than just thinking of you as a contest guy?
I don't know. I mean, I always kind of took pride in being able to do both. But I don't really know how people viewed me, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that one.
Okay. And when you think about the parts that you've had, I mean, obviously Grenade is huge and you close that one, but did you know you were going to close it, or did you find that when it comes out?
No, yeah, I didn't know that had closure, but I remember like I wasn't like fully satisfied with like my filming, right? I'm like, dude, I know I have so much more to offer. I could put together such a better part, but I feel like you think that after every video part, it's just tough to film because majority of the time it's just the weather in the mountains, right?
Yep.
Got to have good weather, right? And it just like cuts your day in half. I don't know. I felt like I was always kind of just jonesing to film more and to kind of be like, oh, dude, like, I can do this, I can do that. I never got to film or never had the opportunity to film it. So I remember thinking that, but, ended up putting together a decent part.
Did you ever have a part that you put together that you were satisfied with? Because with that Bone Age part, people still talk about that thing today. And if you weren't satisfied with it, what were you satisfied with, if anything?
No, I mean, like I was happy with my Bone Age part, but no, I never have. I've never had a part that I've been satisfied with, to be honest.
How cool is it? I mean, it's obviously really cool when Travis Rice calls you up and wants you to be on part of his projects, because they're the most important projects that we've seen in snowboarding in the past 20 years, and it seems like everything he touches turns to gold. But when he calls you up and he handpicks you to be part of his projects, is it one of those things where there's almost like extra pressure on you? Like you're going out with this goat of snowboarding and you feel like you have to land your stuff now more than ever?
No, I never felt pressure, riding with Rice. I felt honored and stoked. I owe him a lot, him and Kurt Morgan, because, I didn't have any sponsors that aligned up with their film, right? So it's like, they weren't doing it to stoke out their sponsors. They truly wanted to be in their film. And I'm really grateful for it, right? Because it's crazy. The Art of Flight and That's It, That's All has a big moment in snowboarding. A lot of people talk about it. And people will like hit me up today. Like nowadays, like, hey man, how's your jaw doing? It's like, my jaw's good. And I'm breaking my jaw in the film,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely like a pretty big moment in my career to be a part of that film.
I don't think it was just your jaw. I think you did some teeth too. When you think about that, no snowboarders really get health insurance, and dental is pretty expensive as well. When an injury like that happens, is it pretty much all out of pocket? I mean, obviously you got insurance for yourself, but like dental wise, if you have to get 5 new teeth, is that like a $50,000 thing?
I did. I actually had insurance. Majority of the pros had health insurance. I had health insurance through the U.S. snowboard team.
Oh, good.
I had it for years, right? I never knew how lucky I was until nowadays. I'm like, damn, I want some of that free insurance, dude.
Yeah, it's key, and it's if you don't have it, you can be digging out for the rest of your life if you have a bad landing.
Totally. Yeah. No, I mean, you kind of need it, right? Like the amount of bones and like injuries that I've got over snowboarding is just like absolutely insane. So Yeah, you need it.
All right. Well, at this point, I could go on and on about marrying Miss New Hampshire. I think it was New Hampshire. I'm not sure. And Lego snowboards and more. There's a whole bunch of stuff that I passed over. But I'm going to just jump into something that I call inappropriate questions. And I was able to get an old friend of yours, a dude with probably the best accent that I've ever had on the podcast. He's former Flow team manager Andrew Mutty to ask the inappropriate questions. And while I was ready for him to put you in the hot seat, he didn't really come up with anything inappropriate. He didn't want to go there. He said something about not wanting to upset wives or do anything like that. So we'll give him credit for that. But Andrew's got 3 questions. I'm going to come in and probably spice them up a little bit, but I'm going to play question number 1 for you right now.
Scotty, man. Hey, too many fun times. I remember, my friend, and I really got to say thanks for being you, and I've enjoyed the ride over the years that we've got to spend together. So I got a couple questions for you from a friend. Number 1, if you could take 2 friends on an epic snowboard vacation anywhere in the world, where would you go and who would you take?
All right, so that's question number 1. There's nothing inappropriate about that. So I am going to say you have many friends and you grew up probably fighting with your brothers. There's been some fights in your snowboard career, and take us through the craziest fight that you've ever been in life.
Here's a good one. This one's epic.
All right. I like epic ones.
I ended up punching my wife in the face by accident. I was like defending my buddy who was in a scrap, and he's like the nicest dude. We were literally just talking. I look over and the guy comes over and just clocks him on the side of the head and drops him, right? And I'm like, oh my God. So I go up and I tackle the guy. Didn't think it like warranted, a punch because I didn't know exactly the situation. But while we're wrestling there, the dude tries to pull my hoodie up like over my head, like a
hockey fight,
like a hockey fight, right? So like I remember like when we got like separated, I pulled my hoodie off and we went to go square up. We literally like squared up like we're about ready to throw punches. And he came at me. I went to go take the first punch, and my wife stepped in the way while I had like all my focus on this guy's face, and I hit her. And of course, like during your like insane adrenaline rush, I didn't even know that I hit her. Right. Until like we're still fighting, and I look over and there's a huge crowd, and I look over and it's my wife knocked out on the ground. And needless to say, it was a nightmare. And ended up getting, having to get ambulanced out of there. And there was no question that I had hit her because my Olympic ring was like tattooed on her thing. So literally, I love my wife. She never held it against me and is like the biggest trooper ever. People like hear that story like, are you kidding me? But it kind of happens more than you might think, right? Like, she was in there trying to break the fight up, and I was fully focused on essentially fighting my opponent and did not see her, so.
Wrong place, wrong time. I love that she just has rings on her, the Olympic rings on her. That's kind of funny. And I mean, I don't love that, but whatever. All right, we will jump into his next inappropriate question. That was a really good one for his first one.
Question number 2. You're a new dad. Your kid's the most important thing in your life. How important is it for you to have your kid ride a snowboard?
So that one is not an inappropriate question either, but I think I can kind of wrinkle this one to make it a little bit better. So how would you feel if your kid said, Dad, all I want to do is inline skate at the skate park every day, and I never want to snowboard ever? And then he says, if I don't inline skate, I'm definitely just going to scooter instead.
I might be a little devastated, a little embarrassed, a little devastated. But honestly, like, I know like it's cheesy. You hear a lot of people say that, but like, I wanted to just go out and have fun, and I wanted to be outside and doing something physical, right? I think as long as you find like whatever passion that you're into outside and physical, I think, I'm backing it. But I would definitely try my absolute best to deter that.
All right, well, iBlade, if your kid ever wants free blades, have him talk to me. I'll make sure I get them for you, and then you can have that mental discussion with yourself. We're going to jump into question number 3.
Question number 3. If you had the chance to bring back Frends Crew or Capital Snowboards, where would you start?
Capital Snowboards being the brand that I think your dad and someone started when you were a kid to have a little Grom product. Frends being the headphone company that you and all your boys started and was going to take over snowboarding with this cool headphone company. You're going to rival Skull Candy. And first with Frends, how much did you guys each have to put in to make Frends happen? Did everybody put in like 50 grand to like start this company?
Yeah, we all threw in like various amounts. I think I was in maybe around 70,000 or something like that. I don't know. We're somewhere all in the ballpark of that.
So that's a lot of money that you guys are in. I guess the inappropriate question will be, you could answer his inappropriate question, but I feel like I'm going to come up with a better one. And the better one would be when the Frends Crew found out that you guys were shifting and making a pivot from headphones that you wanted to wear to women's products that were going to be bedazzled. What was going through your head? Were you like, I didn't invest 70 grand to make women's headphones? Not that there's anything wrong with them.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, that was definitely like a tough one, right? We're like, okay, right? And like at that point, we had kind of like lost control of the company. It was a bad movie, dude. Like when I watched, what the hell is that movie? Like the Facebook movie?
Social Network or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, oh my God. It was not even close, obviously, on that same level. But I was like, kind of reminds me of that. But where the hell was I going with this here?
Just how it was run bad, and it was like the Social Network where you didn't really know what was going on, and then there was a pivot.
Sorry, yeah. I mean, at that point, we had kind of lost control of the company. You know, we just really weren't that involved, right, at all. We were snowboarding super hard. That was our main priority. We kind of only do so much, right? Like, where we cared, like, you know, we originally started as a crew, right? We were just like, dude, let's be a crew. We're the Frends Crew, right? We were that for years. And then we thought it'd be cool to start a company. And it was, right? But, you know, the company just went in a weird ass way, essentially from Kier, you know, because he's like, dude, he's like, no one's doing these women high-end fashion headphones, you know, women specific. And he's right. Like, no one was, right?
You guys had great placement in the beginning.
Yeah, like we were successful, right? I mean, we were in most all Apple stores and Nordstrom, but Kier kind of just ran it right into the ground, just kind of bad management, and couldn't stop spending money. And yeah.
Have you guys kissed and made up at this point?
Yeah, we did. You know, I hadn't seen him for a while. So I saw him last year at Homesick, and we chatted for a little bit. It was good to see him.
Good. Yeah, life's too short to hold grudges about things like that if you're still able to be successful and whatever. At least that's my stupid opinion, but what does that matter?
Totally.
That's Inappropriate Questions, and that's our podcast. And I'll say that there's not many people that I know of that drop out of high school with like nothing going on in their lives but snowboarding like you did at 15, but also have the confidence to kind of pull a Babe Ruth and be like, I'm going to make it in snowboarding. So you quit school, you focus on snowboarding, and you're always putting in the work to make shit happen. And at the end of the day, you not only made it, but you're the high school dropout who has an Olympic medal. And most high school dropouts won't ever even come close to where you are today. And it's really an amazing story. And I want to thank you for telling it and thank you for your time.
Dude, stoked, man. It was fun and I appreciate you.
So that was time with Scotty Lago, and what an incredible story. I mean, the dude pretty much decided that he wanted to work at 15, and he dropped out of high school. Well, he went and homeschooled, but it was kind of like dropping out because it sounds like he didn't do shit. And he went all in on snowboarding. And while I'll never recommend that to someone, to do school the way that Scotty did, by no means am I shitting on Scotty's life choices. I mean, shit, he's had way more of a successful life than mine, and I went to high school and college. So I guess the moral of the story is, while school is important, it doesn't dictate what you're going to do in life. Passion and talent do that. That said, kids, even if you're good at something, please finish high school. I think it'll do you well. On a side note, I really do want to apologize to Andrew Mutty. He gave me his time and sent in some inappropriate questions, but they really weren't inappropriate, so I didn't use them. I do want to thank you for contributing. And again, I apologize for not actually having him answer your questions. I had him answer mine, and I think they came out better. But Andrew, thank you so much. I know you have more in the tank, and you didn't want to piss Scotty's wife off, and that is quite all right. So that's the podcast. Now I want to thank you for listening, ask you to review me wherever you listen, and finally, please support the brands that make this show happen. They are Outdoor Research, Stanley, Elan Skis, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and Best Day Brewing. Have a great week, everyone.